The New Mutants first appeared in the Marvel graphic novel in September of 1982, created by writer Chris Claremont and artist Bob McLeod. Originally conceived as a teenage junior class at Xavier's Institute for Gifted Youngsters, the large cast of characters battle teenage drama while saving the world from some of the most dastardly supervillains. With a younger cast of mutants, it was quite the juxtaposition compared to the more adult and experienced team of the Uncanny X-Men. With the New Mutants, the characters were aimed at a younger generation while still remaining relatable and dark as opposed to kid-friendly material. The series would run from 1983 through 1991, when the title would transition into the more 90s appropriate X-Force. In 2020, Fox Studios would finally release The New Mutants, a film trapped in development hell. Director Josh Boone, a lifelong X-Men fan, wanted a more mature-rated horror take on the franchise until Fox watered down the concept into a PG-13 smorgasbord of fake promises and deleted scenes. Nonetheless, the film still remained unique and original compared to the more bombastic X-Men films. The movie stars Anya Taylor-Joy as Ilyana Rasputin, the sister of Russian X-Men Colossus, codenamed Magic. Armed with a powerful sword and an extraordinary mystic, Magic can open teleportation discs, allowing her to traverse limbo, leading her to any point on Earth. Maisie Williams as Rain Sinclair, Wolfsbane, a teen girl from Scotland who can transform herself into a ferocious werewolf-like creature. Charlie Heaton as Samuel Guthrie, the Cannonball, with the ability to generate thermonuclear energy, causing Sam to propel himself like a human rocket. Henrique Zaga as Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, a Brazilian powerhouse fueled by sunlight. Sunspot can store solar energy into his body, allowing him to burst with superhuman energy. And Blue Hunt as Danielle Moonstar, the Mirage, a Cheyenne Native American with the ability to manifest empathic mirages, deadly three-dimensional illusions to discombobulate her enemies into submission. Together, with the help of Dr. Cecilia Reyes, the Lost Teens must get their shit together to defeat an horrifying evil undreamt of. These are the New Mutants.
You should listen to your mother. We'll say the truth. We're close. You'll be dead by dawn.
Hey, hello, your boyfriend, baby.
Excelsior Horror Fiends, we are back. You are watching the comic book horror show on Horror Fiend TV. Yes, we got a very special guest in the house today. Before we get started, I want to send a special shout out and thank you to Steve from Voices from the Mausoleum. Thank you for joining us, my brother. How are you doing, bro?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. No, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back. Although this is my first time on the comic show.
Yeah, but you're part of the channel, so you're fam, son. So. And of course, Joe the psychologist. You've been waiting a long time for this one, Joe. What's good?
When we put together the list and I said New Mutants, Ricky was like, "New Mutants?" I'm like, "Bro, come on. I'll save it. You're gonna understand why." So I mean, listen, I'm a self-professed X-Men fan. But above X-Men, I am a huge New Mutants fan. I actually love New Mutants more than I love X-Men, especially the original run of the New Mutants.
This film was in production hell. When I first heard that they were making a New Mutants film, but they wanted to have a horror edge to it, it was supposed to be rated R. But it got cold feet. It released as PG-13, but you could tell the undertones are still there because there's not much in the department of superheroics in this film. The characters' backstories and all the crazy shit they have went through and go through inside of this institution because of one character, Danny Moonstar, arrives at this, I don't know, it's not a school, it's a hospital, right? That's pretty much what this is.
It's like a psych unit.
Yeah.
Place, yeah.
Yeah, so all these characters inexplicably start developing all these crazy like hallucinations, let's say, or these evil dream sequences, taking them back to their past trauma, what kind of led them there, and they're not sure why. But then they figure out this started happening when the character of Danielle Moonstar, aka Mirage, arrives at this hospital, and let's start it from there. Joe, this character, tell us about Danny Moonstar. I mean, you mentioned it, a big New Mutants fan. Tell us about her powers and give us your thoughts into what the hell was going on with her and the mirages everyone else kept experiencing, because that, to me, is where the horror lies in this.
Oh yeah. Well, so thank you for calling her Mirage, because I was going to be nervous that everybody's going to keep calling her Danny, and I was going to keep saying Mirage. I mean,
did they ever say Mirage in the film? Because they mentioned a couple of every hero with the exception of Sunspot, and
they referred to her by last name, and in the comics, she went by her last name. You know, the character itself, since she was a New Mutant, has developed to the point that she's Asgardian. She has a lot of ties. Like, she is extremely powerful, but at the beginning of her powers was the ability to basically take your fears and project it and create actual 3D mirages that you can get hurt from. It's not like you're seeing something, you know, and then you swing and you realize it's not there. It's going to hit back. And the storyline used for this movie was the Demon Bear saga. And she had been restraining all of her fears. She had been holding in all her fears, but at the same time giving into her fears, which is how the Demon Bear just kept on getting bigger and bigger. So I love that Josh Boone used this storyline to introduce, you know, especially if you didn't collect the comic books, the New Mutants. Because in the comics itself, when they got introduced, you know, they were just a bunch of kids getting, you know, trained to become X-Men, you know, learn how to control your powers. And then this storyline came and it changed the projection of the book. It went into more horror, you know, leading to Follow the Mutants. That's, you know, the island of Dr. Moreau. If you read the books and also know the island of Dr. Moreau, I mean, it's horror. So the New Mutants tapped into the horror, and that's what made the comic so good. And at the time, I was their age. You know, when the X-Men were out, they were older. I was the New Mutants' age. So I saw myself. And then at that time, also, you know, figuring out my sexuality and stuff like that. The comic book, you know, Rain was one of the first characters. Doesn't get mentioned enough that, you know, besides North Star, but Rain is one of the first LGBT to have come out from back in the day. I'm glad that, you know, they didn't have to rush it. If you read the book, you would have known this. But the source material and the way that her powers were done, it was fucking nightmare. I mean, it is what I saw Josh Boone's vision. I really wish I could see what he actually put together the first time when they told him we need to reshoot this. And, you know, because this is going to be straight up R, if not more, you know, we need the younger audience. I would love to see the horror Josh Boone cut of this movie to what his original vision was, because I thought it was, critics, everybody hated it, but as a collector of the comic book, I thought he did a great job. And those mirages, you know, are some of the scariest shit, just, you know, on the fucking, in comic book, especially type of superhero movies.
Josh Boone was a big X-Men fan too. He has a collection of the books, so it helps that the director is actually a fan. He's not just a guy that was handed a few books. Here, get acquainted with this. You know,
we've said that while we've been doing this series. You can tell the difference when a writer loves the source and knows what he's going to do, as opposed to someone who was saying, "Here, we want you to direct this series."
How about you, Steve? What you thought about this, the mirages, and just talk about the horror aspect too, because like I mentioned before, a lot of these characters, you know, like you know, Sunspot burned his girlfriend pretty much alive.
Yeah.
And Cannonball just took down that entire mine, killing his father and all the workers. So there's some trauma in this film, and to me that's where the horror lies. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think right. I mean, the mutants, as far as any like Marvel project is concerned, are like the most prone for horror stories, right? Because you have like the body horror elements and sort of the uncontrolled power. So I think the Mirages here, perfectly mirroring their trauma, was done really well. And I love that they had little nods to Buffy the Vampire Slayer throughout, because that's exactly what Joss Whedon and company were doing, was like, how do we take these supernatural horrors and use them as metaphors for like teen trauma and angst and all that stuff. So like Rain being branded a witch by the clergyman, right, is like horrifying, and it's so well done. And I think it's, and on a deeper level for the character, you know, coming to terms with her sexuality while also being, you know, Wolfbane, right? Yeah. Like being a mutant, and it's like fantastic. I thought the Smiling Man, fantastic for Magic's sort of abuse and her history there.
Yeah.
The fire in the pool, I thought was really cool. You know, CG was a little odd, but you get that sometimes with superhero movies. It's fine, you know. What was the other ones? And then you had the clergy, the fire, the Smiling Man. And the mining, which was very, you know, very Valentine's Day, right? Kind of.
And claustrophobic. You understood it actually, because when he gave his description of what he felt that day, as the scene kept on, if you notice that the people, as they stood, the vision was closing in on the dad, which he said, I felt claustrophobia. So I thought that as when they did that scene, as they're all just kind of standing there, and you're seeing it's just closing in on dad right before it all happened.
Brilliant. And I think they were also touching on some interesting things with Sam as well. I think it was Rain said, you know, I think he does it to hurt himself, and I think they were touching on some like self-mutilation stuff going on, like with his cast, and he's just sort of pushing himself to the point where he does hurt himself. So they really touched on like some real like psychological issues, which Joe, I know you love.
I like the character of Cecilia Reyes. I'm glad they added her into this. Added a bit of because she's not really a villain in the comics, right? It was interesting too. She's a Puerto Rican from the Bronx. Joe,
you already knew. You already knew it. Like I'm sitting here. I'm like, he's gonna like basically like, yep, that's what I was gonna say. Yep, I was gonna say that also.
We're talking.
Mr. Reyes isn't a comic character.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Oh, she is. Okay, all right. I mean, I knew her corporation that she was, which I know that's another question we'll get to, but
her power is the same too. She does the force fields and that, but that's why I mentioned she's more of a. She's not really a villain.
No, but I mean, but what did you think of the Mirages? You know, before we talk.
Sorry, yeah. Oh man, I loved them. Like I you know, without going too much into it, because you guys already said you encapsulated it perfectly. But what I loved about the Mirages is the horror aspect of it. Like going back to the pool scene with Sunspot, you see him when he's on fire. You could like the pain that he's feeling, not just physically but mentally, going back into that his memories and reliving that time when he burned his girlfriend alive. And going back to the mines, you know, I'm claustrophobic. You know, I have a history of panic attacks, for example, and that scene perfectly like it wrote out the way it would feel to be in that situation if I was Sam. The way everything just closes in and you're just panicking, and then all of a sudden his powers manifest, you know. And Cannonball, he's a human jet, pretty much.
Well, here's the thing. So Cannonball eventually, like with his powers, even on landing, he eventually becomes invulnerable. Like that, his power, he's pretty fucking strong.
Yeah.
Adam was yelling, which is what I did, and then the psychologist had to come in.
Who?
Adam, my husband.
Oh, okay.
In case you guys did not know, sorry. Adam, my husband, and I know he keeps. So my husband, Adam, and I were watching the movie, and it was his first time. It probably was maybe like my fourth time. I said, he's like, you're doing this it's an X-Men movie. I'm like, just watch. And then he's like, why is she not using her powers? I don't understand. Like, why she like? And I'm like, post-traumatic stress disorder, fight or flight. So she's not fighting, she's flight. She's not using her powers right now because it's so traumatic for her. So, you know, the first time watching it, I go, come on, she could. I'm like, you know what? The trauma she went through, she's taken back to that place where she didn't have powers, so she's not kicking into those except for going into her special place. And once she went back in there to remind herself what she did, boom, magic fucking pops up.
Yeah. And I like how I mentioned earlier, they never, you mentioned like Adam was telling me how come they're not using their powers. For the most part, what I liked about this film is they don't really know how to use their powers.
No,
As you can see, Sunspot had no idea how to control it. Only one was magic. She was the only one, is Ileana. And I like how they threw it in there, the word magic. She's like, so am I. Like, I'm magic. I like that.
That was a great line.
That was cool. And I like the fact that they weren't superheroes. They were teenagers, young teens or young adults under a lot of trauma and stress and a lot of confusion. And I like that the stability that they had within that hospital, that it was a feeling of unease. Like Ileana was a bitch, but it's not because she wants to be, but look at her past. And you mentioned the smiling men, Steve. I love, they're so CGI, but I think that makes them creepier. The way they look
good. The CGI was not
they
great.
look pretty good.
Yeah. And I love that they showed the Hush episode of Buffy.
Yeah, the gentleman.
Yes, because I felt like
Joe when I saw that.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with Sinister's plotline and from reading the comics, but I'm a watcher of the animated series. This season of X-Men 97 was very Sinister heavy. So on rewatch, I was like, oh, and then it clicked for me because back in 2020 or 21 when this came out, I hadn't done my rewatch of the animated series yet. So I completely forgot Essex and putting the two together. And I was like, oh, that's really awesome. And I think I remember them saying that I think they were going to have a post-credit scene with Sinister in it, but that ended up getting cut, especially once Disney bought the property, and then they knew that it was going to go anywhere. And
there was a trilogy planned for this thing.
Yeah, it was all a whole horror mutant trilogy would have been amazing. But
anyway, I'll wait till the end.
But I know that Sinister's whole thing is him taking mutant DNA and doing crap with it. Obviously, we all know the Cable storyline and all the shenanigans with that, and and then he uses it to boost himself up and prolong his life. It's a whole like Dr. Frankenstein kind of Dracula-esque story. And I love that we got that sort of in the background. I would have loved to see go on,
I love the fact that they had Sinister looming in the background, but I don't like the fact that you mentioned he was supposed to be in this. And Joe, do you know who was supposed to play him?
No, actually.
John Hamm.
Was it going to be John?
Yes, they had a whole plot already set up, but the reshoots, because of COVID and the Disney acquisition beforehand when Fox, it got scrapped. And I mentioned before, it was supposed to be a trilogy. Warlock was supposed to be in the second one, and the third part was going to be Inferno. So, it sucks, but it is what it is. I like that Sinister, again, he wasn't in it, but his presence was the entire film, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Especially after you figure out, he's the one behind all this. Cecilia Reyes' character, too, is interesting because, again, she wasn't really villainous in the book. And here, she doesn't... I'm still not 100% sure if she was a villain or she was forced to do what she had to do because of Sinister. Now, Joe, I'm going to throw it to you before I finish, because you would probably answer that better than me. But I dug the fact that they had all these, like, other little plot points in the background percolating, but the bad part is we never got to it because they canned the whole series. But what's up, Joe? Talk to me.
Man, I'm going to say the one thing I didn't like is that they made Cecilia Reyes the villain. Yeah. Because she ends up helping out the X-Men. She joins them for a brief stint.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
And the reason that she became a hero is because her father was gunned down in front of her. And she became a surgeon. So she's a doctor. And when she joined the X-Men, she realized she didn't want to be a hero in the sense of putting on this suit. She wanted to be a doctor. So they took a character and made her a villain. You can see the couple little moments there every once in a while of humanity in her, but it's almost as if they changed the character. It's one of my little knocks on the movie, to be honest with you. They could have gone with somebody else. You know, I mean, shit, it would have been easily to introduce Emma Frost in here. None of them would have known who she was. You know, they could have gone with other types of villains, not made a superhero into a villain, you know, though I loved how powerful they made her, you know, because in the comics, she wasn't as powerful as she was. She can have a force field all over the entire place and at the same time put a force field to suffocate you. I thought the scene where she sat there and put the force field over all of them
And shrinking.
them. But she, you know, she was mostly focused on Danny. And, you know, I as we talk about trauma, she talked about her mother being a vet and her mother having to do, and I think it was a dog that had attacked somebody. And the mother, and she had to put a dog down. It had rabies and she realized she couldn't do anything. And again, she became a doctor because of her parents. And she bring, you know, the whole movie is about trauma inflicted upon as you're a child. She herself is a mutant who is now helping Mr. Sinister. And in some of the other X-Men movies, post-credits, you have seen the suitcases with the vials of blood. He'd been collecting the mutants' DNA throughout, which is how it was slowly building there. So I love the tie-in to the Essex Corps and obviously Mr. Sinister, you know, because Mr. Sinister did end up pulling in eventually some members because the New Mutants, once Cable came around, ended up becoming X-Force. The New Mutants were the original X-Force. Everybody talks about all these X-Force variations, but I just want to remind everyone that the original X-Force came from the New Mutants because the New Mutants, when this storyline came around, it, you know, don't call them X-Babies anymore. And then they went through horror and all these characters became really powerful, you know, young adults and eventually became X-Force where they were like, fuck this shit. We're going to fucking really fight back. And we got this guy Cable who's telling us we can do this shit. So that's like the whole thing. Like the New Mutants literally were the evolution. And it was great because I kind of grew up with them. So, but yes, Cecilia Reyes becoming a villain. Not happy about that. There were so many other people in throughout the X-Men series that they could have picked to be a part of this in order to tie it into Sinister and not take you know, because she's from the Bronx, she's Puerto Rican, you know, and you made her a bad guy.
Well, I wonder if I mean, because it's Sinister, and for people who follow the animated series Morph, I wonder if had this had gotten another movie and they didn't kill her off at the end, if it would have been revealed that Sinister was actually like controlling her and she actually was good.
And, well, yeah, I mean that would have been a good way because it would have redeemed the character. Because honestly, you know, as much as I hate this stuff in our movies, there's very few little of them, and you know they took a Puerto Rican superhero and made her a bad guy. So that's my only little, because it's just more personal. And from the Bronx, man, what you do that for? What's up? I mean, damn. That's all I gotta say about that.
Well, let's talk about the Demon Bear versus the New Mutants. This part was pretty interesting to me because Magic, Eliana Rasputin, Anya Taylor-Joy. When I saw this again, I'm like, God, dog, they actually got Anya to be in this fucking movie. She's big now. And like when this came out, obviously she wasn't as big as she was now while they were producing it. Again, this movie was filmed a while ago. It came out in 2020, but yeah, it was done a while ago. And I saw when she has Lockheed, I'm like, Lockheed, isn't it Shadowcat's pet?
Yes, but it did start with her.
Yeah. Oh, did it? Oh, so I didn't know that. So I liked when she sprung into action, and I love how her powers, how they were represented on film. I think it looked pretty cool without being too over the top compared to everyone else, because the film was kind of more grounded compared to the X-Men films. And when she fought the demon bear, the special effects here, I think they worked. I mean, like Steve mentioned, it could be a little wonky at times, but for what it was, I think it looked really well. The demon bear was imposing, and the fact that by the time we got to this part, us as the viewers, whether you were a follower of the comics or not, you understood the symbolism and what this demon bear meant. And I think this scene was, as far as a climax, normally with superhero movies, the climax to me is always, not even superhero movies, but like big budget movies. The climax, when it's always this big CGI fest, that's when I tune out. But because the film was so grounded and it waited until this moment to get the big CGI battle, I think it worked because it definitely broke up, film in a way where it was like, okay, we got the grounded aspect of the story. Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. Now we're getting the action where it really does matter. And by the time it gets there, you're not. It ain't like Transformers, where you watch Transformers and like, oh my god, the whole film is one CGI battle. Then when they get to the main battle, you're really like, oh, I had enough. Like, come on, just end this. You know what I mean? But
Just a bunch of metal.
Yeah. So in this film, they saved that to the very end. And I like, again, even Sunspot to this point was still wary of using his powers, because he's just not going to all of a sudden learn how to do it and be professional at it. He was still like hanging back and he's showing fear. And Sam, same thing with Sam. And one thing I wish they would have, I wish she would have actually turned into Wolfsbane. She didn't. She was like, I don't know. They gave her fur on her hands.
You had some hints of it, and then you had got the full wolf, but you didn't get the in between that.
That is. If
we
that's
one
of my nitpicks.
One of the other ones.
What's that?
If we probably would have seen that if Fox would have carried through with all their movies before they ended up Marvel bought the rights, or not Marvel, Disney bought the rights.
I don't know. I just found that lazy the way they did that. Maybe it's a budget issue. I don't know, but it is what it is. But as a character itself, I liked it. I think Maisie Williams did a good job on it. And yeah, that whole battle scene, man. What I liked about it a lot too is the fact that the demon bear fucked up Cecilia Reyes, man. Again, she got killed, but we had some violence in this film at this point, and they didn't have to go out full gore, but there was enough there to let you know, damn, she got fucked up.
The crunching noises, and it was good. Yeah.
The sound design was really good on that. How about you, Joe? What did you think about the demon bear? You read the arc, right, with the demon bear?
Oh, fuck yeah.
So how was that compared to the comic?
It was pretty similar, but she wasn't using the demon bear. She was using bears, and then eventually the demon bear shows up and fucks her up. Like, he fucks up her spine, like she's in the hospital. Up until this point, the New Mutants were not the New Mutants. It was a group of teenagers who happened to get involved in these little things here and there. Magic did not trust Danny the same way it was done here. And she started figuring out things were happening because of Mirage with everything that we're seeing. At this point, Magic herself hadn't accepted that she's part of a team. And she actually, in the comics itself, which is why I love that they use a psychiatric hospital, because in the comics itself, when Mirage got her ass beat by the demon bear, they will go to the hospital. So while in the hospital, Magic uses her powers, puts spells to try to keep the hospital protected. And during that time, the Mirages start happening. And, all these battles end up going on. And Magic finds that she's home. She learns she's part of a team. And this is what brought together the New Mutants. And this is why, like, the storyline for, Steven is starting to get into all these books and reading them. This storyline is up there with Days of Future Past and the Dark Phoenix saga. Because those storylines changed the teams, that changed the course of the comics. And this storyline changed the course of the New Mutants. It made a group of teenagers become a little bit more adult, but they were dealing with scarier stuff. So they were like, think of them like the Justice League Dark. is a good way of putting them. Because with their stuff, even though they did do the superhero stuff, there was there was a little bit horror element now in there. But yeah, I love the battle scenes. I did not get thrown off anything with the CGI. I totally fangirled when Lockheed showed up, because when she kept using him as a puppet, I'm like, is he ever going to show up here? And then when we finally see Lockheed, oh my God, yeah. But yes, he does, because I think what happens in the comics is that Magic passes him to Shadowcat, because her Kitty Pryde and Magic are, because they're the same age. Even though Shadowcat had been part of the X-Men, Magic was part of the New Mutants, but they had a relationship. So Magic gave Shadowcat, Magic gave Shadowcat Lockheed, and that's how, like in the Excalibur comics, Lockheed is there with her, but she got him from Magic. But
they're kind of like sisters, because the Colossus, they almost like bond like sisters,
Yes, I mean it's. I thought it's out of all of Fox's X-Men movies, probably the only one that actually kept to the source material without making all these changes to make the fans. Again, I think because it was pushed as a horror, it got like turned people away. But closest wise, as far as casting, keeping to a source material, the New Mutants is pretty much the closest out of all of the catalog in the Fox's X-Men movies.
All right, Steve, talk to us about the Demon Bear. What's your thoughts on it?
I love the third act in this movie, the final climax. I sort of like your point, Rick, of, you sort of get lost in the big action sequences in a lot of these superhero films. Like, obviously the final battle in Endgame, cool, fantastic, right? But like, and you get these like little moments with the characters, but it's such a big battle that you're like, it's easy to get lost in it, or something like Transformers. With this, much like Buffy, they use the battle to really highlight the triumphs for each character, right? Like look at Sunspot. Like, let's not forget, like, his parents sent him there almost like as a conversion, like to fix himself, right?
Yep.
So like that was him ultimately like accepting who he was. So and even in X-Men 97, they use it sort of as like a gay conversion camp, like whole thing, right?
Yep.
So. And then obviously with Wolfsbane, like, yeah, I would have loved to see the full transformation, but I really love when she sort of lets loose on the bear, similar to when she just like hops on Reyes and she's just going for the eyes. Oh man, so she gets some really great moments in this. Obviously, same with Magic and Lockheed. I love to see that. And Cannonball, like I sort of love that it's a smaller battle, but it's so important to each character's like overall like acceptance arc and healing,
which is how it was in the comic books. Like that's what I'm saying. This is why Josh Boone did an awesome job actually taking, and this is what happens when a fan of a comic book puts out a movie.
I like the fact that you mentioned character focus. That is the one big takeaway I got from this film, especially after my rewatch. It is a character-driven film. The horror doesn't lie in like the gore and blood and guts. It's with the real life horrors and trauma these characters went through to get where they are now. Like the Cannonball, this guy's all beat up when you first see him because he's doing that to himself. Like that's kind of messed up, man. Yeah.
Well, and it's almost like cutting. He's doing that to himself because what he did to his father and the other miners. So it's like, because he doesn't start realizing that he's becoming invulnerable. He's breaking right now, but eventually he becomes invulnerable to even his own impacts. So he's hurting himself and probably going, fucking shit, it keeps healing.
All right, well, let's close this one out. Let's rate it. Steve knows our rating system. We've gone through it. Steve, you're the man. Let's go. Tell us.
Yeah, this one gets an alpha level rating for me. I don't think it's quite Omega. I don't think it's the best of the X-Men films, but it certainly beats 80% of some of the stuff that they've put out
It's different.
from Fox. For me, it's up there. For top three, it's Days of Future Past, X-Men United, and this movie. Or from the Fox era, I think are the top three for me. Really cool nods. Totally, actually, just seeing behind you, Rick, I completely forgot about the Psycho reference of Rain in the shower. She looked just like Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
Janet Leigh when she was screaming. I was like, that also just gives it an extra.
Cool, yeah. You know what? I didn't think about that until right now when you mentioned it. You're right.
The scream, the short hair. It was a Psycho reference.
Yeah.
Which was so cool.
Good shot.
But I think it works as a horror movie. It works as a superhero film. Works on a lot of levels.
Well said. Joe the psychologist.
Well, I want to lead because the other part I wanted to point out, because Steven just said it. So when Rain first got branded, if you looked at it, it was upside down, giving you for W for a witch. The way that the branding was now positioned, it did an M for mutant.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fucking little.
That was cool.
Oh my God. And I told Adam, when I told Adam, because he's looking, he's like, oh no, I'm like, it's upside down. It's M. It's for mutant. Like the first was the witch. This is now mutant. But again, the movie itself, it was the source material was the New Mutants finally finding out who they were as individuals, all them fighting through this trauma that they've all gone through, and them coming together as a team. Because at this point, as the series went on, Magic and Mirage have a really close bond. They trust each other, the same way that Magic did not trust Mirage in here is how it was up until this point in the comic books. So that's the other part, is that if you didn't read the comic books, it still, there was so much that they had to try to put in here. And mind you, this arc was only 3 issues, and it still had so much source material. I mean, they go back to Days of Future Past, to Rachel Summers, and actually have an interaction with her. The Starjammers appear in here, and you get a Warlock. And with Warlock, like I said earlier, Warlock leads us to, while the Fallen Mutants happened and they're all going through their things, the New Mutants are dealing with the Isle of Dr. Moreau and this person who is taking, young teenage mutants that he's making and basically torturing them. And the other part that I just want to point out, that I was watching with Adam, when Rain took Danny, because now I'm going to say their name this way because it was, on a date, to watch the rain hit. I was just watching it. Adam's like, ew, they're going to sit in a cemetery. And I'm like, so you didn't pick up on that, did you? They literally laid down on the cemetery of all the kids that had been being killed on here, which I feel the New Mutants took place after Logan, because when Mirage sees all of Cecilia's memories, it goes back to Logan when they're where X-23 was at.
Yeah, they had that footage in there. They did.
So this movie, so New Mutants is after.
Good show.
So the X-Men aren't around at this point.
Yeah.
All this stuff has happened. So this was going to be leading us to the darker ages of the X-Men, which would have been, yes, I know Fox shat all over this fucking series. I still love it. I mean, they made some changes here and there that many people are not happy. I like X-Men United. For me,
you mean making Mystique the main character?
with main characters and some casting here and there,
Bananas choices.
But for me, as far as following source material, none of those movies followed the source material the way that New Mutants did. And for that is why I'm giving it an Omega. I'm
with Steve on this one. I'm an Alpha. I love this film though. I think it's highly, highly underrated. It's a movie that I think if it would have had more time to breathe and it would have got off of the director's got off his back and let him make the R-rated film he wanted to, it would have been even better. And the fact that it felt constrained, And again, Warlock was supposed to be part of this movie, but because of the budget, they axed him. Mr. Sinister, same thing. He was supposed to be a little part in here as well, but they cut that out as well. So the movie had more meat on the bone, but unfortunately, we got a bit of the scraps. But what we did get, though, I appreciate it. I think it was really well made. Again, the CGI isn't always up to par, but I think it works to the film's benefit because the Smiling Men look CGI, but I think that makes them even creepier looking, bro. They look creepy as
Like an
hell.
uncanny valley kind of creeping to it.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
movements.
Yes,
No.
and the fact that and that's tied to Ileana's past with her abuse as a child.
The
Again,
slow movements, because every single touch to everything felt slow to her.
Yeah,
And that's exactly how these fucking monsters moved.
yeah, and that just makes the horror even more like in your face. It touches home because not everyone could relate to it, but as a human being, we could relate to it because it's a real emotion. People go to that. It's not somebody getting injected with a super serum or getting bit by a radioactive spider. This is real trauma that these people are going through, and again, it's to get these powers at puberty. And I love how Ray is explained. When you first get these powers, you don't know how to control them. You're gonna hurt people, and that's so realistic. And we don't get that in the X-Men films. The X-Men films glorify these powers, to a point. Here, I mean, look at these characters like Sunspot burned his girlfriend alive. Enough fucking said. Steve, my man, voices for the Mausoleum, great guy, great channel. Him and Angel do great stuff. And of course, you got this motherfucker, Joe the Psychologist over here. So check him out. And we're going to bid you farewell from the Comic Book Horror Show here at Horror Fiend TV. Stay good, stay healthy, but most of all, stay scared. And Joe, take us home, my brother.
We are out.